In 1841, Felton Matthews charts the layout of Auckland, sketching the blueprint for New Zealand's emerging capital. The harbor sweeps in a gentle arc around the budding community, while the Haratu stream flows right through the envisioned town. Matthews designates the shoreline for future land reclamation and outlines what will become Trafalgar Square, home someday to Albert Park and the university. On his maps, everything appears neat, deliberate, and logical. Auckland lingers as mere contours on parchment, poised for settlers to transform the surveyor's ideas into a thriving urban center. Back in 1840, Auckland consists of little more than canvas shelters dotted along the waterfront. Early arrivals endure harsh conditions as vessels remain moored in the bay. The terrain remains wild and untouched. Those inlets depicted in this artwork will one day be filled, paved, and developed. The promontory will get torn down and leveled for progress. At present, Auckland embodies potential amid the muck. Governor Hobson proclaims this spot as New Zealand's capital. The pioneers arrive ready to construct it from the ground up. By 1843, Queen Street illustrates the rough enforcement of justice on the frontier. The pillory looms directly outside the prison. Violate the rules, and you'll endure public humiliation as locals pass by. At just 3 years young, Auckland feels more like a hamlet than a metropolis. Basic wooden structures line muddy lanes with vessels bobbing in the harbor. In a colony forged from wilderness, upholding law and discipline is crucial. The prison and pillory serve as stark reminders that even in this remote corner of the globe, society demands order. Commercial Bay, in 1844, captures Auckland's expansion, hugging the shore. Shortland Street rises up the slope. St. Paul's Church dominates the scene, its steeple piercing the skyline. Ships ride at anchor in the inlet. Canvas tents mingle with wooden edifices across the terrain. Point Britomart extends boldly into the sea. Now 4 years established, Auckland surges ahead. Its residents number around 2,000. The seat of government begins to take form, evolving from initial makeshift camps into enduring foundations. New Zealand's inaugural Parliament House emerges in 1854. As the capital, Auckland boasts this Gothic revival edifice as evidence. Lawmakers convene within, crafting policies for the entire territory. The structure will grow over time and integrate into Auckland University College. For the moment, it symbolizes the city's prominence. Though Wellington will claim the capital title in 1865, Auckland in 1854 remains the hub where the nation's destiny unfolds. The edifice testifies to the locale's influence. A painting from 1857 depicts Auckland extending beside the harbor. Tall-masted ships throng the docks. Structures huddle close to the edge of the water. The settlement presses toward the interior, scaling the ancient volcanic slopes. Auckland's inhabitants reach 8,000. Prosperity blooms from commerce, logging, and property dealings. Vessels link the port to Sydney, London, and San Francisco. All goods flow via this gateway. Newcomers disembark while shipments depart. The harbor shapes Auckland's identity and drives its development. Queen Street, during the 1860s, reflects Auckland's coming of age. Two-level storefronts flank the thoroughfare. Horse-drawn carts trundle along the broad avenue. Crowds bustle on the walkways. As the city's vital lifeline, this strip pulses with commerce, retail outlets, inns, professional offices. Proper systems now underpin urban life. Street lamps fueled by gas will soon brighten the evenings. With 12,000 souls, Auckland evolves from a rugged outpost into a legitimate colonial hub, even as Wellington prepares to eclipse it as the political heart. The 1862 annual regatta unites Auckland in festivity. Maori waka glide across the waters in competition with European yachts. Held to mark the city's anniversary, the event draws thousands to the banks. The spectacles blend Maori and Pakeha traditions, if only superficially. Yet inland, the New Zealand wars rage on. with British forces clashing against Maori over territory. The regatta provides a fleeting interlude of communal joy amid the colony's deepening divisions. Around 1860 to 1870, the third government house perches majestically on the rise. This serves as the residence for New Zealand's governor during Auckland visits. Crafted in Italian Renaissance fashion with expansive lawns, it exudes authority. However, Auckland's tenure as capital draws to a close. Wellington assumes the role in 1865, owing to its more strategic position and defensibility. The government house will later join Auckland University. Presently, it signifies a prestige already ebbing southward. The 1880s reshaped New Zealand's trade landscape. Chilled meat and milk products can voyage to Britain intact thanks to preservation tech. Ships with refrigeration capabilities upend the industry. Auckland's docks hum with activity from this fresh commerce. Laborers pack frozen mutton, butter, and cheese aboard ships headed for London. The country morphs into the empire's larder, nourishing distant realms. Auckland reaps wealth from the surge in exports. Its populace swells to 30,000. The metropolis carves out an economic role independent of its former capital duties. St. Paul's around 1880 endures as Auckland's pioneering church and congregation site. The modest 1841 original has yielded to this rebuilt Gothic revival form. The bell tower soars over nearby rooftops. Here, the Anglican flock assembles for baptisms, weddings, and memorials. This historic church serves as the heart of the community, offering a sense of stability, heritage, and a vital connection to the homeland and the religious beliefs carried by the early settlers. From the vantage point of Hobson and Wellesley Streets in 1884, one can see Auckland stretching out over its volcanic terrain, dotted with wooden homes topped by corrugated iron. Amid a patchwork of emerging neighborhoods, though it no longer serves as the capital, Auckland continues to expand steadily. Its residents number nearly 40,000, fueled by commerce rather than administration. The urban footprint creeps into the hollows and ascends the slopes. Auckland is evolving into the enduring form it will hold. New Zealand's premier urban hub, despite Wellington's grip on governance. The Calliope dock launches on February 16, 1888. There, HMS Calliope and HMS Diamond rest in the freshly completed facility. For Auckland, this represents a major advancement, allowing vessels to undergo maintenance on-site instead of journeying to Sydney. Such infrastructure generates employment and underscores naval relevance. Auckland emerges as the nation's key port for sea operations. The Waitemata Harbour now accommodates larger ships with ease. Consequently, the local economy branches out from reliance on chilled meat shipments. Ship construction, maintenance, and fleet support emerge as fresh pillars sustaining Auckland's progress. By the late 1890s, Queen Street pulses with energy. Towering edifices, streetcars powered by electricity gliding along, and throngs of pedestrians lining the pavements. It's the zenith of Victorian-era Auckland. Yet, conflict looms on the horizon. The South African War erupts in 1899, prompting New Zealand to dispatch 10 volunteer units against the Boers. More than 6,000 troops head overseas, with Auckland contributing prominently. Many depart straight from the Waitemata wharves. The populace bids farewell to its young men heading to fight in a distant imperial clash. The Empire calls, and Auckland responds. An overview from above reveals Auckland's waterfront and piers, extending along the Waitemata. Over the prior 2 decades, fleets have made port calls. In February 1903, the Australian squadron docked under Vice Admiral Fanshaw's command. Warships drop anchor in the bay, displaying the colors and reinforcing Britain's dominance at sea. Auckland integrates into a vast imperial network of defenses linking London to the Pacific reaches. The port manages both trade ships and warships alike. Fast forward to 1919, and Lower Queen Street captures the post-war landscape of Auckland. Electric streetcars traverse the central lane, sharing space with horse-drawn carts and the first automobiles. Sidewalks teem with activity. World War I has concluded, claiming 18,000 New Zealand lives, including thousands from Auckland, and not everyone returns. The city begins to heal and reconstruct. The 1918 flu outbreak strikes a heavy blow as well. Still, Queen Street presses forward. Streetcars continue their routes. Daily life persists in a metropolis irrevocably shaped by global conflict. In 1959, the Auckland Harbour Bridge finally links the North Shore to the downtown core. Vehicles flow steadily in both directions. Prior to its opening, ferries shuttled passengers across the water. This span revolutionizes Auckland, sparking a boom on the North Shore. Residential areas mushroom over what were once pastures. Residents can reside northward while commuting southward for jobs. The bridge stands as Auckland's signature landmark, prominent from every angle. The metropolis expands onward, solidifying its role as a bustling powerhouse.